As we approach 1 o'clock, I hope everybody is getting ready for the next session, which is called Bounty and the Call of Shavuot, Remembering, Reckoning, and Receiving Sacred Texts with Adam Mazo. It is now 1, so I will stop sharing and hand it over to Adam.
Hi, everyone. Hag Sameach. Good afternoon. It's good to be with you all. Um, in the spirit of Hineni, I just wanted to um, welcome us into this space and just share a little bit about what I'd love to do together with you all for this next hour. Just settle into the space, watch a 9-minute film together, reflect on that film, and then maybe do a little Q&A if you all want to as well. Um, in that spirit, let's let's arrive. Let's be in this space together. Um, if you would like to close your eyes, you can close your eyes. If you'd like to turn your camera on or off, you can do that. I'm just going to invite you to get comfortable in your body, in your space. Um, put both your feet on the ground if you're able. Let your shoulders relax a little bit. Let your neck relax. Relax your jaw, your eyelids. Take 3 deep breaths. Keep breathing. Don't stop breathing. Um, and just consider this question. What kind of ancestor would I like to be? What kind of ancestor would I like to be? Let's take one more deep breath. And if you closed your eyes, you can open them if you wish. Um, and I just want to say hi to everybody. And if you're there and you want to turn your camera on, or even just like give us a emoji thumbs up or a heart just to let us know you're here, let us know you're together, or a wave if you're on camera. Just to know that we're all in this room together. It's nice to know that we're all here. And then I want to invite anybody who wants to in the chat to just answer this very simple question. How are you? Give a word. How are you right now in this very moment? Tired, awake, enriched, exhausted? How are you doing? I'm just going to wait a minute for folks to put something into the chat if you want to. I'm just going to read aloud as they come in. Thank you, folks. Aware, good, tired, grateful, happy, inspired, happy, excellent, a good, tired, thinking. This is beautiful. I love this. Thanks, everybody. Um, Wonderful again to be with you all. So I want to introduce myself before we watch this movie. So my name's Adam Mazo. I'm a member at Temple Israel of Boston. Nice to see some familiar faces and nice to see new faces. And I am the father of 2 boys who are 10 and 6, Gideon and Raphael. And you might see my all redheaded family. I'm the outlier in my family. I'm the one that does not have red hair. My all redheaded family you might see around Temple Israel sometimes if you're there. Um, those boys of mine are descended from South African settlers. They're descended from Israeli Jews, from a long line of Hasidic rabbis from Lithuania, from shopkeepers in West Virginia and Virginia, from Confederates who fought for the South in the U.S. Civil War, um, from so many other things that I'm probably forgetting this moment. All of them Ashkenazi Jews, as far as I know, in all of their lines from my side and my wife's side and all of our grandparents' side. And I say that to say none of us are just one thing. Each of us contains multitudes. I'm also white, in addition to being Jewish and Ashkenazi. And I like to hold all of that as I think about who I am and who we are and where we are. And so today, as we gather for Shavuot, a holiday of revelation and receiving Torah, we're going to witness a different kind of sacred text, a text that was actually has been kind of transformed from the most profane into something sacred. So this short documentary, Bounty, it's 9 minutes long. It tells the story of a proclamation issued in 1755, right here in Boston, Massachusetts, where I am. I should have mentioned that I'm in Jamaica Plain for those of you who are in the area. Um, that bounty offered government payments for the scalps of Penobscot men, women, and children. It's a really grim history that many of us were never taught, but it's one that Penobscot and Wabanaki and many indigenous families have carried and known for generations. So in Bounty, you're going to see Penobscot parents and children read their ancestors' death warrant. They read it aloud, not to relive the trauma, but to reclaim the history, to speak truth, and to affirm their presence, their here-ness, as some might say. Um, and the document was designed as an instrument of destruction, and it's being reclaimed as evidence of this hidden history of genocide and reimagined as a declaration of the survival of the Penobscot people. My understanding in Jewish tradition, we read sacred texts aloud, especially hard ones. It can be an act of courage, of memory, moral responsibility, and that's what we're being invited to witness today. Shavuot is about the Torah being given at Sinai, but also that we continue to receive it in every generation. And so, a question that I'm sitting with today, and invite each of us to sit with, is what if we approached difficult histories with that same kind of sacred attention? What if we treated truth-telling as a form of revelation? Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we watch the movie. If the movie doesn't play smoothly for you, I'm going to put the link in the chat. You could leave the Zoom room, go watch the movie on Vimeo, and then come back into the Zoom room. Hopefully that's not going to be an issue, but if that happens, Tali has helpfully shared that link. So don't go there unless you need to. If you do need to, make sure you click on the link before you leave the Zoom room so that you have it, and then just come back and rejoin us if you need to. The movie is 9 minutes long and it's open captioned, meaning everyone will see the captions and you can't turn them off. After the film, we'll take time for reflection and discussion. And I invite you to listen not just with your mind, but also with your heart and consider what you might be called to receive. So I'm going to turn on my screen sharing and invite us all to watch Bounty for the next 9 minutes. Thanks, folks.
I don't think we can hear it. Adam, I don't think we can hear.
No sound, folks?
No, no sound.
Okay, let's try again. Sorry, friends. All right.
Sisters running
How about
through the
now?
woods.
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Hello, folks. Welcome to the Old State House and to the Governor's Council Chamber. This is the oldest public building in Boston.
I've had dreams before about our ancestors running through the woods. Didn't know what we were running from.
I bring my children in this room because they can see these dark things, but they know that there's a real strength and resilience in our people.
Charlie, do you understand why we're here today?
Because we want to be on TV.
It has a lot to do with this proclamation here, Charlie.
No.
So what do you think about this word right here?
Perfidious. He probably meant wild and dirty or horrible.
These orders came from the government. They were sick of our tribe resisting colonization and not following rules.
Most times, the rules of engagement for wars and stuff like that, kids aren't supposed to be killed.
It's easier to feel comfortable with killing other people in wars or in genocidal acts when you see them as less than human.
This proclamation was written a long time ago. They declared the Penobscot people enemies.
And then he died.
Yeah, a lot of our ancestors. That's why this paper exists.
Does it make you feel anything actually being here?
Makes me realize like how resilient our people are and how like we're still here.
A proclamation. Whereas the tribe of Penobscot Indians have repeatedly, in a perfidious manner, acted contrary to their solemn submission unto His Majesty long since made and frequently renewed.
I have therefore thought fit to issue this proclamation and to declare the Penobscot tribe of Indians to be enemies, rebels, and traitors of His Majesty King George II.
And I do hereby require His Majesty's subjects of this province to embrace all opportunities of pursuing, captivating, killing, and destroying all and every of the aforesaid Indians.
For every male Penobscot Indian above the age of 12 years old, 50 pounds.
In today's money, that's like $12,000.
For every scalp of a male Penobscot Indian above the age aforesaid, brought in as evidence of their being killed as aforesaid, 40 pounds.
For every female Penobscot Indian taken and brought in as aforesaid, 25 pounds.
For every scalp of such female Indian or male Indian under the age of 12 years that shall be killed and brought in as evidence of their being killed as aforesaid, 20 pounds. 20 pounds on what?
Pounds is like dollars.
I'd be sold.
Yep. They had trading posts where people would bring bags of these scalps, or they would bring bodies of Penobscot people, and they would tally them up just like if they were animal skins, and they would get money for them.
You would sell me?
I wouldn't sell you. The government told the colonists to go do this.
A female Penobscot Indian was worth half as much as a man. That's patriarchy right there.
We weren't seen as people. We were seen as animals, basically, in that you could quantify based on the size of us.
There was this study, they put these mice into mazes. They traumatized them by giving them an electrical shock. But before they issued the electrical shock, they sprayed orange blossom scent. What the scientists found was that those mice who had been traumatized, their kids and their grandkids and their great-grandkids all had the same traumatic response to orange blossom, even though they had never been given an electrical shock with it. The memory of being hunted like this is in our blood. And it still scares us.
This proclamation, which is essentially a call to exterminate the Penobscot people through hunting and scalping and murdering, was signed in this very room that we are sitting in.
They tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. Anybody got a lighter?
Hmm. Thank you so much for watching together, taking another deep breath. I want to invite you, if you wish, to share in the chat again a word about how you feel in your body right now. How do you feel in your body watching Penobscot children and elders read that proclamation aloud in the old State House? How do you feel after watching that film? Just gonna sit for a moment for folks to share if they want to. Can't breathe, nauseous, so sad, sick, sad, ashamed, responsible, sick, angry, grief, complicit. Thank you so much for sharing. It's all real and valid. Rage and helplessness. Another question I'm going to put out to anybody. You can feel free to just wave a hand, or you can say something in the chat. Did anybody know about this story already? A couple people. Yeah, I didn't know about it either until about 12 years or so ago. It's a lot to carry, I know. And I also know that we made this film, me, Don Neptune Adams, Molly and Bryant, who you met in the film. They were the two mothers that you saw there, and Ben Pender Cudlip and Tracy Rector. We made this in large part to help folks know the history, so that we can, I mean, yes, feel the sadness and the grief of what happened, but also hopefully feel inspired to do something and to make sure that the next generation knows this story. To that end, I'm going to put one more prompt in the chat for you all. If you feel comfortable, I'd like to know more about. it can be a word, but it can be a sentence too. I'd like to know more about. What's something that you'd like to know more about after watching um, this film? If you want to put something into the chat, and then we'll shift into more of a group conversation. But I want to just give you all a minute or two to think about something that you'd like to know more about after watching that film. Native Americans. How the children coped. Mm. Thank you so much. And if you haven't already, I would invite you to look back and see what everybody else shared. And I just happy to get to these questions, but also it's just good to get them out into the world. And I just wanted to share a little bit about how this film came about, um, and more of the story of the document at the center of it. Um, so I first learned about this Scout Proclamation in 2013 when we were filming Dawnland, a film about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission in Maine that was investigating the taking of Wabanaki children, that's native children native to Maine, through the child welfare system. Um, Following the passage of the Indian Child Welfare Act of 1978. So they were looking at taking of children from 1978 until 2012. Um, in many of our lifetimes, this is not, in all of our lifetimes, this is not something that happened long ago. Um, and it was during that time when we were filming that we learned about this proclamation that's known as the Phipps Proclamation, named after Spencer Phipps, who signed this proclamation. Spencer, Massachusetts is named after him. A genocidaire, a perpetrator of genocide. Spencer, Massachusetts is named after him. William Shirley, who was also a governor, also signed some of these documents. Shirley, Massachusetts is named after him. Westbrook, Maine is also named after another one of these folks that issued these documents. I saw the first time that I actually saw the document on paper, it was posted right outside of the Penobscot Nation tribal offices, right outside the chief's office in Indian Island, Maine, just a bit north of Bangor on the Penobscot River. They posted outside the office as a sign that this happened and they're still here. And we really wanted to include this story in Dawnland, but we couldn't really figure out a way to weave it into the story. Not that it wasn't important; it's obviously very important. We made a film about it, but so we had this idea that the story needed to be shared. We've heard from many Penobscot folks about the importance of sharing it, and then we also learned about the many, as you saw at the end, hundreds of Scout proclamations that were issued. The vast majority of them in Boston. Um, as me and my colleagues like to say, the original seat of white supremacy in these lands, Boston, the place where the genocide of Native Americans was largely designed and and announced. And we had a lot of conversations about this document with folks along the way, and it's also something that Wabanaki Reach, the organization that convened that Truth Commission, teaches about and shares about often. That's the first time that I heard it, is from our colleagues at Wabanaki Reach, Esther Ann and Penthea Burns, and other folks who do a lot of good work with Wabanaki folks in Maine. Wabanaki are the people of the Dawnland, the people of the Dawn. And so after we finished Dawnland, we circled back to some of our Penobscot colleagues like Don Neptune Adams, who appears in Dawnland and who you saw in Bounty, and Molly and Dana, and we said we've heard from so many people that they want this story to be told, and this particular document is one that is shared widely, because it specifically targets Penobscot people, but it also uh, there are so many others that target by name different native tribes from around the region, from around the Northeast. And you also see, even in Pennsylvania and other places, it was almost like a Microsoft Word template. Though obviously those things didn't exist at the time, but almost word for word, the same document reproduced in Pennsylvania to target Lenape people, and in other places across the land. They shared the strategies, they implemented in the same ways. And so we talked with Don and we talked with Molly, and we noted, as of course as you hear in the film, that the document the the folks that did this targeted children. Um, and we thought, well, maybe it's important for children to be involved in telling this story. And what Don Neptune Adams said was, if a lot of folks often ask, oh, well, is this appropriate for children? Can children watch it yet? And can children watch this? And sure, I'm not showing this in length to my 6-year-old yet, but I'm going to show it to Gideon soon, who's 10, as I mentioned at the beginning. Um, and the children in the film were, right around that age, and we talked to them, the parents, and said, how do you feel about having them read this? And they felt like, yes, we have to do that, because if we don't, it will be discounted. People will also say it's not appropriate for children. But by including our children in the film, we can encourage folks and say, our children are in the film. Your children can learn about this. As Don says, if our children were old enough to be targeted by these proclamations, your children are old enough to learn about it. Um, and so I see you, Margot. And so we spent a lot of time talking about um, how much detail we would go into with the children, and the parents decided, how to go about it. They talked a little bit ahead of time about what the document contained, what it was about, and you see a lot of the conversation in the film is talking through, this is what that means and this is what this means. And so they all did it at a level that they felt was appropriate for the ages of their children. Charlie was 7, and Layla was 9, and 9, 7, 9, 11, and 12 for the ages of the children at the time that we filmed. So there was a lot of conversation about how to go about this, and we didn't dig into a lot of the gruesome details of how this was implemented and how extensive it was with the children. It was really just focused on, this is the document that was issued. Um, so that said, I want to take a breath there, and I'm sure I left out a lot, but Margot, I see you there. Do you want to jump in? Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, no, thank you, Adam. And I put a hand up. I can wait an hour. So thank you for calling on me. I wanted to know a couple things, but before that, I wanted to say, aside from being a very fine short film, I really appreciated a certain visual choices you made, like introducing the room and then turning on a light. I just I just thought it presented a certain context. But I'm not familiar with this document, and I'm wondering how familiar the families or any of the this native indigenous tribe. I'm sorry, I can't remember. It starts with a P and it ends
Oh,
with a Scott.
Penobscot.
Penobscot. Thank you very much. Um, how long they've been aware of this document, and is this part of their own educational history
Hmm.
for their children, and how long have they been able to incorporate it, and at what age do they start to do so? Because none of the children of various ages here seem to have been familiar with it, and it's a very old document, so I don't know what the circumstances were. Thank you.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. And I also am happy to answer, and I also put some other questions for each of us to engage with if folks want to share after I respond to your question, Margot. But happy to kind of take the conversation wherever you all want to go. Um, so yeah, the visual choices. I mean, a lot of that was the expertise of my colleague Ben Pender-Cudlip, who's the director of photography and has a great visual mind, and also came about because of my colleague Mishi Lesser, co-founder of our nonprofit called Upstander Project, who's done a ton of research on this. And if you really want to dive deeply, you can go to the Upstander Project website. And there's an extensive teacher's guide, 4 lessons. I think it amounts to probably 200 pages if it's all printed out, about all this history and the various other scalp proclamations and all the other things going on at the time. And it was Mishi who noticed that it was the document was signed in the council chamber, and she was the one that investigated and figured out that it was that room. It's that famous room that is always talked about as the site of the Boston Massacre and where the Declaration of Independence was read from that balcony. And that same room is where many of these scalp proclamations were signed. And at the time that we filmed this in 2019, that history was almost entirely unacknowledged in that room. It was unacknowledged in that room. There have been very occasional, very brief temporary exhibits showing the scalp proclamations. And I'm really glad to say that now you can bring your friends and family to the old State House and they can watch Bounty right outside of the council chamber and learn about this history, which was not the case for the previous um, the previous 250 plus years, where this history was largely ignored. So that was an important objective for us. We had to kind of fight to film in that room. And we wanted folks to understand that that room that for so many of us in the dominant culture has been lifted up as this place of independence and glory and all these wonderful achievements, is also a site of the perpetration of genocide. And that's a history that we also need to know and acknowledge and name. And it's also the way that we depicted the space was also to show how our Penobscot colleagues and families walk into that space as many or any of us would walk into Auschwitz or someplace like that. um, Even though you can walk outside and it seems like a jolly good place, where so many wonderful things happened. But this is a building where people named their ancestors and decided to eliminate them. So that's why we depict the room in that way. As far as the history within the tribes, as far as we know, this is something that has always been known and taught within not just Penobscot, but amongst Indigenous folks. There's even I'm not going to remember the exact details, but if you dig into the Bounty Teacher's Guide, there's even an interview with a native journalist from the late 1800s, where she references this document specifically in an interview as evidence of the genocidal nature of the U.S. government. So this is something that has always been known, even if it's not been widely known. And the kids learn about it. I don't know. I have to double check about exactly what age they're learning about it in Penobscot communities. But I think, it's not necessarily for Penobscot folks as ubiquitous as the Holocaust, but it is certainly very well known amongst Penobscot families and kids. It's just something that people talk about, it's part of the history. And it's something that people have to hear about a lot because of the kind of the misinformation and the notion that Native people were scalping Europeans. And while that did happen, um, what did not what it was the Europeans who actually weaponized it and turned it into bounty hunting in a way that Native people never did. So that's the distinction. And so it's hard when there's so much of the Hollywood media that has perpetuated the idea that it was Native people who were going around scalping when it was actually the opposite. And it was settlers who were being incentivized to do it. Um, so I want to invite in other folks, other voices, whether it's to react to those questions I put in the chat or um, whatever you're thinking about. Happy to hear from other folks.
Anne, do you want to share?
Thanks, Tali. Thanks, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. I think there was a point in the film where there was a mention of not being seen as human. And so two things came to mind. I think as Jews, we have been on the receiving end of that, of not being seen as human, and we've also perpetrated that against others. And it made me think of the Jewish orientation to seeing the divine in others,
Mm,
whether they are your neighbors or your strangers or whatever. So that's the connection I saw.
yeah, amen. And you made me think of just a note about what one of the things that I know Dawn has alluded to when she talks about that is some of the research that we did found that there were a lot of similar bounty proclamations, or I don't know if they called them bounties. I think they did call them bounties. That were payments issued to settlers for hunting wolves and other animals, and the language was almost identical.
Mm.
Almost the same language for hunting wolves as it was for scalping Penobscot people. Um, and that always sits with me. And also we haven't been able to determine definitively, but to know that there is, the the settlers, man, they were not deleting, they did not have disappearing messages on their signal chats. Like, they documented everything. And there's documentation, and you can look at it in the bounty rewards archive, where you can see many, many, many people petitioning the government for land in exchange for the native people that they scalped and killed, or even petitioning because their ancestors, their fathers, largely fathers, killed Native people, and saying, "I want my land. Here's the evidence that I killed." And they had to the evidence they were supposed to provide was scalps, human scalps, and we know that's written about those scalps being burnt, incinerated in a tar barrel. We haven't been able to determine where that happened, but we know that it happened. And presumably it happened in Boston, because that was the place that you needed to go to get paid. Um, none of this history up until our film being installed there is it's not shared on Freedom Trail tours. It's not shared to the millions of people that come and visit the colonial sites in Boston. Um, so one of the things that we certainly hope as we think about memorialization is that these stories can be known, and also to help people understand, most importantly, the thing that our Penobscot and other Wabanaki colleagues emphasize is they're still here. They're still here, and we need to affirm that and recognize that, and find ways to not just memorialize the past, but also show that people are still here, and that this is not just a thing of the past, and that Penobscot and Native people are not just street names and statues, but are actually living people, and our Massachusetts, Nipmuc, and Wampanoag neighbors here in this area are still here too. Just catching up on the chat too, but feel free, anybody, raise your hand, or we're small enough if you want to just unmute and jump in with your comments or questions. Feel free. Yes, Faye, thank you. We have a responsibility to share this with our communities. That's what happened for me. I didn't know it, but any of this stuff. I grew up in Anishinaabe territory in Minnesota, at Temple Israel of Minneapolis. I grew up also in Calusa territory in Sarasota, Florida, and then I moved here to Massachusetts territory in Boston. And I did not know any of those things about whose land I was on until about 2015, when we were in that journey of making Dawnland. I didn't know any of it. I golfed on Calusa Lakes Golf Course, and I had no idea that that was the name of a people um, who, were buried and unrecognized in that area in Florida. Um, yeah, the erasure is strong, and we have to do a lot of work to counter against the erasure of Native people. And yes, Shannon, we talk about some of those papal bulls, those infamous papal bulls that that said that the heathens, that any Christian folk could take whatever land they found if it was occupied by non-Christians, which basically meant indigenous people. And that's kind of what created the legal framework that still exists to some extent today, that allowed for the colonizing of all of North and South America. And there's more about that on the Upstander Project website as well, in terms of the learning resources that actually the one about those papal bulls is one of the ones that gets visited the most. Anyone else want to share, or questions, comments? Grateful to you all for holding this, this hard history. It's not easy stuff, but we think it's important for us to learn about it and to, yes, acknowledge how painful it is, but also not let that keep us from talking about it and sharing about it and learning about it. Hi, Ken. Go ahead.
Hi, Adam. Thank you so much for making this film and for bringing it to all of us, and I hope it gets a wide distribution. One of the things that I'm interested in is knowing more about, as I put in the comments, Native American history. And do you have a good suggestion about where I can start? Because I feel that as a rabbi, I know a lot about our tradition, but I really don't know about Native American tradition, and I would be starting as a beginner, essentially. So
Sure.
is it some resource that you could recommend that I could just
Sure.
start to learn?
Sure,
I
sure.
appreciate
Are you in the Boston area or elsewhere?
Yeah, I live in Brighton.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, not to be tooting our own horn, but we certainly have a lot of resources that you can look at. I mean, the Bounty Teacher's Guide, it's not just for teachers, but hey, you're a rabbi, you're a teacher, could keep you occupied for a good while, for one thing. And also our film Dawnland, and the teacher's guide that goes with that, and the learning resources that go with another short film that we did called First Light. Um, some folks might say, oh, that a lot of that's focused on Maine, and that's true, although Bounty is very much here. Um, but the people of the Dawnland, the people of the First Light, Wabanaki means people of the First Light, Wampanoag means people of the First Light. They're all Eastern Woodlands people who shared this land for, since time immemorial, before settlers came along. So I feel like all of that history is very relevant to us, whether we're in Boston or in Maine, and also the long, long ties between Boston and Maine. Maine being part of Massachusetts for
Right.
much of its history. And also, I also love An Indigenous People's History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. Um, is a great book, and there's also like a young readers version of it too, for I think it's sort of for maybe middle school and up. That's a good starting place as well, because I really believe in, when I think about, I'm no scholar of here-ness. I'm not going to put myself up in that way, but I think when it comes to our relation, for us as for those of us who are Jewish Americans, knowing whose land we're on and understanding how settlers came to be on this land and understanding the history of this place, I feel like is an obligation for all of us. Especially as Jews, I feel like there's an obligation to just know the history of the place that we are, and the deep relationship between Jews and land and indigenous folks and land. We've got to know,
Sure.
who we come from and where we come from. We also need to know the history of the place where we are. So,
Right. So
yeah.
Bounty Teacher's Guide, Dawnland. What was the other thing you mentioned? Film
Um,
Dawnland. Get that?
An Indigenous People's History of the United States
Yep.
by
Right.
Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And also,
Yep.
I can put a link in the chat. We also list um, a ton of resources on the Upstander Project website that
Okay.
I'll put in the chat, on the land page, where there's a land acknowledgement, but I think there's also those links could keep you busy for a very long time if you listened and watched all the various things that are listed there. And apologies that there might be a couple of broken links there, but I think for the most part, most of those links are working, and there's just a lot of really there's been a real renaissance of indigenous made media in the last
Mhm.
10 years or so. And we're linking to as much of that as we can to help share and help folks learn and understand. And yes, Nancy's pointing out to visit there's some new sculptures outside the MFA, finally to juxtapose the problematic statue that's been outside the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston for so long. It's certainly worth checking out, and you don't even have to pay the price of entry. It's right outside.
Mhm.
You can just pass by and check it out. Um, it's certainly a good one to see, and probably some more ideas will come to mind as we keep talking.
Thank you very much. Appreciate
And
it.
and actually, you know what? Since we're among friends and company, I'll just mention one other thing that we've been doing is we're working on a short film about hidden indigenous history along and around the Freedom Trail in Boston. And we're not doing those tours widely publicly, but I'm sure that if folks from the Temple Israel and wider Jewish community wanted to do something like that with us, we could talk about organizing something for our community to do a walking tour with our Indigenous colleagues and talk about things like there's so much of the history that's just almost none of it that's mentioned on the Freedom Trail. For example, the hangings, the executions of Native people on Boston Common that's hardly known about and not memorialized on Boston Common, and even the fact that up until 2005, Native people were legally officially banned from entering Boston. It wasn't until the I think it was the Democratic National Convention was coming here, and some folks said, "Oh, you know what? Maybe we should abolish that law that's been on the books since the 1600s and make it legal again for Native people to enter Boston without being under the guard of two soldiers." So that was finally abolished in 2005 under Menino and Romney at the time, after 300 plus years of being on the books. And there's so many other really rich stories that we're wanting to share in a upcoming educational video for folks to understand, go beyond the stories that are told on the Freedom Trail and understand more of the indigenous history of Boston, of this place. Who else would like to jump in? If anyone wants to, feel free. I just wanted to. Somebody had asked about the connection to Shavuot, and and for me, it's this thing about that I mentioned in the beginning about sacred text and the way that Penobscot folks have transformed this profane document into something sacred, into something that's not just about genocide, but it's about survival and about saying we're still here. And that holds a lot of meaning for me. And I think the thing that keeps me wanting to share these stories, I think, is my Jewish upbringing and the kind of the this notion of as my colleague Keith Tanamuk, who was on the commission in Maine, says, once you know, you know. And then what are you going to do with that information? Um, and now we all know. And so that's the question. What will we do with that information? How will we carry it forward? Lador Vador, right? That's what kind of that's what keeps me motivated.
Thank you so much, Adam, for joining us this afternoon, and thank you, everybody else, for being here. The next session will start at 2 o'clock on the nose. Adam wants to stay for 1 or 2 minutes if anyone has additional questions. Otherwise, I will put up the music and the screen for the next session while everyone takes a bio break. Don't go far.
Thanks, everybody. Wonderful to be with you all.
Is there a history of the schools in New England, like there are in Minnesota and Canada and some of the other northern states?
Oh, you mean like the boarding schools, for
Yeah,
example?
yeah, where
Yeah,
children were basically kidnapped.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, for the most part, because the genocide started here,
Mhm.
a lot of Native people here were killed, and the ones who survived were our colleague Roger Paul, who is Passamaquoddy and Maliseet, talks about who grew up along what's now the border between Maine and Canada. Talks a lot about many of his siblings who were taken up to Shubenacadie, which is in New Brunswick. Um, and there are also records of Penobscot and other Wabanaki people being taken to Carlisle, which is kind of the most well-known um, Indian Industrial School is what it was called, the Carlisle Indian Industrial School in Pennsylvania. Richard Henry Pratt was the military guy that founded that place. Um, there are not as many examples of boarding schools in this region because the whole project was to push people to the west. But there's a lot of really great, if you're wanting to dig into that, there's a lot of really great resources from the uh, National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. They,
Yeah.
some more films and maps and resources that are really rich and important.
Yeah, I have friends who are Lakota and Dene who have family members who um, were in the schools and um, the whole project of um, reclaiming the bodies that were found and uncovered at a lot of those schools. Um, so, so appreciative of the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Um, Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, do you think Mago applied? I was wondering if there will ever be a Truth and Reconciliation Commission for Native Americans, and Mago applied maybe state
Hmm.
by state, but not under this administration. I know, but
Yeah.
sometime in the future, maybe a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah, there are efforts to try to make that happen. I know Deb Haaland, who was the Interior Secretary, was leading some of those, and she did do she did lead a really big initiative on I'm blanking on the exact name of it, but around the boarding schools and produced some really extensive reporting about about the schools and what they did, and because that was
Yeah,
under the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which was within her Department of the Interior. So there was just a really there's a lot that you can dig into there. And so yeah, there are efforts to try to create a National Truth and Reconciliation Commission, but yeah, it's definitely a very steep uphill climb at the moment.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Thank
but,
you.
sure thing. And thanks again, everybody, for being together and learning together.